Back with a Short Time Wrestling podcast. Today we're going to talk with Drew Tewell. It's a name you don't yet know, and we're going to talk to a name that you haven't seen in a while unless you've been following NAIA wrestling. It's Cam Tessari. We got a project in the works from Drew and Cam, and it's gonna be a fun one today. We're going to talk about that here on the Short Time Wrestling podcast. First, Drew, welcome to the program, and Cam, good to see you again, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Good to see you.
As we were joking about before we started, the first time I ever got to say man bun in my professional announcing career was the Shaggy one down there on screen, readjusting his hair during the NAIA finals. So I remember Dort Mayab looking over, did you just say man bun? Yes, I did. But three-time All-American, once at Ohio State, twice at Lindsey Wilson College, home of the Blue Raiders. And Drew, let's just kick back to you first on who you are, what you're doing, and why are you here?
Sure. About 3 years ago, I stumbled onto an article on Facebook about Cam and his story, and I read it in the afternoon, and it just shared his wrestling journey through his junior year at Lindsey Wilson. And I'm a screenwriter, and as soon as I read that article, I was just like, man, I got to get in touch with the guy who wrote it. And by the end of the day, I was actually in touch with Mark Hazelwood with the Norwalk Reflector. And he had written the article at that time in the Sandusky Register. And we connected, and I was like, man, I want to write a screenplay about this story. So, and that's kind of where it all started. That was back in April of 2017. So it's a few years in the mix here, and movies take a while. So that's when the genesis of the project, but it really didn't start about another year after that, when I talked to Cam, and he had finished up at Lindsey Wilson and won the national championship, and we touched base and decided to move forward on a movie. And this isn't a documentary. This is a narrative movie. And so hopefully, this next year, 2021, all the craziness of 2020, but in 2021, we're hoping to film the movie and even hopefully release it if possible, but really hoping to film it this next year. It's been over a 3-year process now. I'm sure Cam can tell you a lot about how many conversations we've had, but I enjoy it, and screenplay, I think, has turned out great. So I'm excited to get this ball rolling and get filming next year.
Cam, this is something that, your trials and tribulations were documented, not professionally as Drew will try to do, but in the world of social media, message boards and such. And, coming from Monroeville, part of that Monroeville Four, you, Hunter and Logan, Stieber and Chris Phillips, that was the group that was coming out, that all eyes were on you guys coming out, and then going to Ohio State. Chris went to North Carolina State, and then eventually, he didn't continue his wrestling career in college. But the three of you guys from Monroeville and Ohio State's lineup was like a murderer's row of sorts. And to now go through what you've gone through, which will be documented in, again, not a documentary, but how much did that kind of weigh on you when you get approached to be like, okay, somebody's wanting to be up in my business and hearing my story? I mean, how receptive were you to Drew's initial overture?
I was pretty receptive to it. I was excited about the idea of, kind of spreading the story or telling the story. And, he offered me an avenue to do that. And I think he actually got a hold of me on the bus trip back from Nationals that year. And I was pretty interested in the start. And for a good chunk of time there, we were calling each other every Saturday for just talking on Facebook for about an hour and a half, just kind of going over the details of the storyline. And it's been a lot of fun.
Now we look at in part of the screenplay, they break out how Corey Ruff contacted you, and Corey Ruff's the head coach at Lindsey Wilson College. And take us through that part of the story. I mean, the real story here, of course, the facts of the matter are going to unfold here, but just in your own words, explain how Corey Ruff reached out to you and why you ultimately attended to say, all right, I'm going to go to Columbia, Kentucky to wrestle at Lindsey Wilson College.
Right. So the first time Coach Ruff actually reached out to me was right after I'd left Ohio State, and I responded to him and let him know that at the time I was still pursuing a D1 national championship, and was leaning towards going to Hofstra. And he's actually reached out after I'd left Hofstra, or was kind of forced out, however you want to describe it. But he reached out again and actually cited that just kind of my receptiveness to the initial approach was the reason he decided to reach out again. And that's kind of how that happened.
Kind of a dumb question going in, but what did you know about the NAIA before Coach Ruff had contacted you?
Actually not much at the time. I know, just kind of growing up in Ohio, I knew Notre Dame when I was younger was part of the NAIA. I don't believe they are so anymore, but yeah, that was about all I knew, is that Notre Dame was a powerhouse in the NAIA back in the day.
Yeah, now they're Division II. They've got a national title there too. But one thing that, there's the NAIA schools in Kentucky and Tennessee in that Mid-South Conference that pull a lot of kids in from Ohio. So when you finally make that decision and get there, there might be some familiar faces in that wrestling room.
Right, yeah. I knew a couple kids in the NAIA just that I didn't even realize were continuing their wrestling career, the Dobbins brothers, for example. But yeah, it was definitely a change of pace that I actually didn't know what I was in store for at the time.
Now, one thing that I've seen, and I've announced the national championships at various divisions, D3 and NAI are pretty much in my wheelhouse every single year. And some of the fans that may not follow those divisions will think, okay, any D1 transfer comes in is going to have immediate success, especially somebody with your pedigree, Division I All-American. Oh, they should be able to walk through the NAIA. How untrue or true is that statement from your firsthand perspective about how tough the NAIA can be?
No, I mean, wrestling is wrestling. It doesn't matter what division it's in. You got guys that are out there competing, doing everything that they can to put their best product on the mat. And if you don't come prepared, it's going to be made known. And it's wrestling. No matter what division you're in, it's wrestling. It's two men's wills going against each other and just a battle.
How much of a target on your back did you feel once you got in that lineup? You're like, Cam Tessari down here at Lindsey Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there's definitely that target on your back. I think everybody kind of wants that shot at the the D1 All-American, and I enjoyed it though. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I got everybody's best shot, and I loved it. I love the sport of wrestling. That's what you should be putting on the mat every time, is your best shot. So I was enjoying it.
Now, Drew, coming back to you, what background in wrestling do you have that kind of piqued your interest on this story?
Wow. My background in wrestling would take us all the way back to when I was really young. I wrestled for a short time. So it wasn't necessarily the wrestling. I'm actually developing another sports movie. It was just Cam's story. And, different stories, are told with a different setting. So this just happens to be wrestling. But Cam's story is just so good. And so the wrestling is a big part of it, especially the way that I've written the screenplay. But I just really like the story. And so, of course, as I spent time, talking to Cam, interviewing Cam, spent a lot of time talking to Coach Ruff, interviewing him, watching Cam's footage to incorporate it in the screenplay. I mean, this movie is super authentic. Cam can tell you he's read it. And so I've learned a lot. And but at the outset, I didn't really have a whole lot of experience with wrestling.
About the story, Cam, when does, I guess, your moment, I don't want to use a incorrect analogy here, but your come to Jesus moment, so to speak, and say, I got to get myself in gear. I need that degree. I don't like what I'm doing. It kind of go into some detail on what that moment was like. Say, I'm going here more than just wrestle. This is gonna save my life, so to speak.
I don't know if there was necessarily a come to Jesus moment. I mean, my father was a youth preacher back in the day.
I don't mean literally come to Jesus, but you know what I mean.
I think it was probably after Hofstra. I ended up going and working at a plastic company and doing some concrete on the side, working construction, and just not really wanting to do that the rest of my life. And or at least not even I didn't want to do that the rest of my life, because I'm still doing that to this day. But just to not be forced into that, I guess, just to have the alternative degree to fall back on if my body ever couldn't hold up to the labor demands of construction and pouring concrete. And my father he'd always been my biggest supporter. He'd been I don't know, he's the best man you could ever want in your corner my entire life. And he'd always wanted me to get that degree, and just to kind of be able to do it for him was kind of cool after kind of letting him down, I guess, for quite a while.
So where do you think an outsider would look at this, or another wrestler, to be like, they can find some type of positive message in how you've kind of used wrestling as a wrestling redemption, so to speak?
I think I was just kind of looked at as a black sheep for a while, just went down the wrong path, kind of squandered all my opportunities that had been presented to me, and just to kind of be on that last straw and being given that last chance and really taking advantage of it. Just, it's never too late kind of story, I guess you could say.
Drew, kind of the same question, because you've mentioned, like, you read this story, you found the story, and you found it remarkable, and you wanted to do something about it. Beneath the surface, okay, superstar wrestler screws up, gets second chance, gets third chance, wins title, okay? There's more than that to the story, clearly.
Right, yeah. And I mean, he had only been a junior, and I had already liked it. And of course, then when he wrestled his senior year at Lindsey Wilson, he won the national championship, because, of course, when he was a junior, he didn't win the national championship. So it really worked out perfectly, but I think that it's really a story about second chances. I mean, all through the screenplay, even in his relationship with his fiance. I mean, the whole screenplay, really, the theme is second chances. And I think everybody can relate to that, and it's just a positive theme that anybody can relate to, even outside of wrestling. And I've had people read it that, aren't in wrestling and aren't in movies and the screenplay. It's really resonated with them. So I think it's pretty universal.
What's really cool is when you go through and I'm reading it and I'm like, yep, remember that guy? Yep, know that guy, covering the NAIs. And then, you've got the guy, Weber from Montana State Northern, the guy that's in the finals down in Topeka, Expo Center. It's such a great event that doesn't get talked about. And then it's not just this weight class, but wrestling has those kind of stories. But then to just see him come back, because I'll be honest with you, not knowing your story is, okay, the D1 guy comes in and doesn't win the NAIs. Is this guy going to be back next year? You came back. Cam, talk about how much you wanted to come back and win a title and be on the top of the podium for Coach Ruff and Lindsey Wilson after, for a lot of people would say you got upset in the finals.
Right. I mean, just being the competitive guy that I am, you always do want to go out on top, I guess, or redeem yourself. And Coach Ruff had kind of put his neck out on the line going out and recruiting me when not a lot of other people were. And you always want to kind of pay those people back in life. So I wanted to get the title for him as much as I wanted to get it for myself. And I had a newborn son in the crowd at the time. I think he was 3-4 months old. So you always, kind of wanted to impress him in a way. Not that he'll ever remember it, but I'm just a competitive guy. Always want to go out on top, and very happy with the way the story ended.
Now, with the story, again, Drew's screenplay did fill in some gaps for me that I didn't know, since I covered you way back in the day, when you're, at the junior age level. So it's like, okay, yeah, remember you coming through. Didn't know you. So I'm sitting there reading and filling in some gaps, obviously the chances you got at Ohio State, the chances you got at Hofstra. But Corey Ruff, and I guess to a greater extent, the NAIA does offer a lot of second and third chances for some athletes. You know that Corey Ruff had some monster athletes on the team that had great Fargo credentials. Some of them were ranked very high coming out of high school, that he showed the door. So you knew that just because your name is Cam Tessari doesn't mean you were getting any special treatment. What was that impact like on you?
No, I think that Coach Ruff started recruiting for character, and I think he was one of the few people who kind of saw past the storylines that I was putting out and could see that I was a good guy deep down, and just really appreciative for the second chance that he'd given me. But no, I never thought that I was going to be able to go in there and do what I wanted. I tried that 2 times, and it didn't work for me, so I knew I definitely had to change something.
Drew, how much of a focal point of the screenplay, when you get pen to paper, is gonna dive off, or not pen to paper, but hit record, is going to dive off into Coach Ruff in the situation at Lindsey Wilson. That's, I mean, the program's not very old. It's one of the newer programs in the country, and it's made a pretty good rise to the top of the NAIA ranks. But how much, it's Cam's story, but how much is going to focus on that inspirational coach type of angle?
It's definitely in some of the wrestling. There's a good amount of wrestling in the screenplay, and so that's there. And then it's a really authentic story that's true to life. So Coach Ruff's first attempt to reach out to Cam, and then his second attempt, and then he comes to Lindsey Wilson, and so Coach Ruff is throughout it. And I will say too, Coach Ruff was very helpful with writing this. I talked to Cam 20 times over a period of a couple years. I talked to Coach Ruff, quite a few times as well, and he was very helpful with the screenplay. And so he's in there a lot. And really, it's kind of, in my mind, it goes back a little bit. A lot of movies have it. If it's Star Wars with Luke and Obi-Wan, or it's The Karate Kid with Daniel and Mr. Miyagi, it's a universal story. So it's in Cam's story, which again, I just think it's a great story, and I can't wait to make it a reality. So,
Cam, when we look about that Lindsey Wilson room, I was reading the screenplay, and I see the assistant coach Myron Bradbury. Why is Myron Bradbury an answer to a trivia question?
Why is Myron Bradbury the answer to a trivia question? I do not. I would love to hear it. So
he beat Mark Hall in the Kentucky State Finals.
I did know that.
Talk about the room a bit, because I've never been to Columbia, Kentucky. I've never been to Lindsey Wilson campus. It's obviously a small school. It's within the NAIA there, the Mid-South Conference, really good. The conference itself has risen to a really, really high level of wrestling. Right. Now, you look at those competitors, you're seeing some familiar faces, not just from Ohio, but then they say, okay, there's some guys that are also down here with me. So, the familiarity of your opponents notwithstanding, how much did you enjoy just competing again?
It's my favorite thing to do. I'm actually coaching now at a high school, and my favorite part about that is actually going in there and still doing live. So I absolutely love the sport of wrestling. It's something I've loved since I was a kid. So when I get to do it, I really do enjoy it. So it was a blessing.
Now, of course, some people are going to want to know, what's the relationship now with your former teammates, like the guys at Ohio State, or specifically the Stiebers?
I haven't talked to Logan in quite a while now. Relationship is still fine, but Hunter came over to my parents' house probably 2 Christmases ago, and that's the last I've talked to him.
Now, Drew, when we get into the dynamic of Monroeville, which setting things up the way you did, again, based on true facts, I'm curious, when you put together a film that's pretty much rooted in factual information, are you planning on using the real names? How does that work? The licensing or whoever's can sign off on using what? How does that work? Because I'm kind of curious if I ever want to do something like that. I'm gonna pull your ear.
Sure. So true stories are what I like to do. My other project that I'm developing is a true story. So true stories are something, that's really what I write. And as far as writing about a true individual, if the information's public, you don't really even need their permission because it's public information. But if the information's not public, you actually need their life rights. So life rights is just a fancy word. It sounds better than basically you're getting them to agree not to sue you over the movie. That's all life rights are. So when you do use somebody's true name and their true likeness, you want them on board. And with this movie, we're using as many of the names that we can. We even have Trey Leone, who Cam faced in his championship match in 2018. He's actually on board to play himself in the movie. So, and I like to have real people because, he's going to be wrestling. So where we can, kind of little bits and pieces, we'll have real people. And you see that in other movies too, like The Fighter. If you've ever seen that movie, they have one of the real people from it. So very authentic. But as far as getting rights to use somebody's real name, you do, as long as they're on board, they're on board. But and it changes too. If you want to make a movie about a big time celebrity, you can actually pay a fee, and the fees get pretty big. That's something in Hollywood could cost you $100,000 or more. Hope that answers your question a little.
Yeah, just don't use the term big board or you'll end up in court in Travis County, Texas, but we won't talk about that right now. Now, we talk about where you want to see it going. I mean, kind of part of that life rights. You said Trey Leon's, sign on and play himself. Who are you eyeing to kind of fit some of these roles that'll play some of these characters and such?
Well, we have a guy to play Coach Ruff. His name's Damon Leepery. He's an actor. He's a good friend of mine, actually. He's been acting for about 15 years. I just really thought they had the same likeness. We're working on, I'm not going to say at this point, but we're actually talking to a guy right now, potentially, and I don't want to say because it's not guaranteed that we're going to get him, but we potentially have an actor already to play Cam. I can't really say who it is just yet. He hasn't agreed to it. But, you try and get somebody that you feel is going to be the best for the role. As somebody, it's different with someone that's playing Cam. He has to be able to act. Whereas someone that's, an assistant coach in the crowd, he doesn't have to do there's not a lot of dialogue, so that you want them to act a little, but it's not as important. But definitely trying to get some good actors on board. And, with COVID-19, we actually might have a little better opportunity because a lot of actors aren't working right now because a lot of movies aren't filming right now. So, but it's all part of the process, I guess.
Cam, if you had you pick, who would play you in the movie?
Probably Zac Efron. I think that's my boyish charm.
Right.
My devilishly good looks.
You'd have to teach him how to wrestle, though. So, I mean, how hard would you cross-face Zac Efron if he was playing you in the movie?
Like I said, I'm pretty competitive. So if I take me down, I'd take his nose off.
When we look at what you want to get out of this, Cam, I mean, you said you're pretty open with it and telling the story. And what do you foresee in the future? Say this thing gets done. Say this thing doesn't get done. How much of this has been helpful to you? How much do you want to see this succeed? How much do you think your story is going to help other people?
I don't want to put any predictions on it. If I can be an inspiration to one person, then I would consider this a huge success in my eyes. I'm not going to put any predictions on how successful the movie will be, how many people it will reach, but if we can inspire one individual, I would consider that a success.
Let's write the sequel right now, Drew. Let's start with Cam Tessari, the father. How much has fatherhood changed you?
Unbelievably. I'm a lot more cautious now. I wear my seatbelt all the time. I wear a mask out in public because I can't bring anything home to my daughter who has some comorbidities. She just wouldn't fare well with it. So just a lot more cautious of a person. Maybe more patient. I don't know. But yeah, being a father has been the greatest experience of my life. I absolutely love those two. So
better than winning a national title, surely.
Oh, 100%.
Now, Drew, when it comes time to put pieces together, looking at, Cam's children, or soon to probably more children on the way. I'm going to make that assumption because y'all are young. And you look at the backstory of them going back to high school. How many different tangents do you think you can go in getting and pulling more out of that story to make it even more inspirational, and knowing that they were together, then they weren't, then they're together again. Now there's you've got the child involved, and then you've got all these other things that you look at any dramatic film is going to encompass. So I guess what's the tough part in deciding what you're going to focus on, what you're going to have on the side, what hits the cutting room floor, so to speak?
I kind of go by my gut, even as I'm writing it. And as I talked to Cam from the beginning, started out with the articles were kind of a foundation. But then once I started talking to Cam, we talked, he can tell you, quite a few times for a while, and getting the overview of his story, and then I talked to his parents, then I talked to Coach Ruff, and talked to few other people. So, but to answer your question, you kind of go by your gut and what makes sense. When you're writing a screenplay, you outline it first. Once you outline it, then you begin to write, just like if you were writing a book. But and then you send it to people to read and kind of hear if they can follow it and what they think in general. But it's always better, talking about the cutting room floor, it's always better to cut it in the screenplay than after you've filmed it, because it's cheaper, because then you don't have to film it. You're not wasting thousands of dollars. So, but this screenplay at where it's at now, it's pretty tight as far as, it's pretty concise, and I'm excited about it. And I've gotten, for the most part, only good feedback, and so I'm ready to rock and roll. But there's a lot of pieces beyond the screenplay even. So, but I've gotten our cinematographer on board, who's the main camera guy. Got our composer on board, who's very talented, and I'm really excited about. I think the music's going to be really important, so I'm really excited at where it's at. So just hope this project has been unique for me, because every step of the way, the doors keep opening. So it's really gone good, even though it's taken a few years, but it's really gone good. I think that the average movie takes about 9 years to make. So we're trying to beat the average definitely on this. I'm excited about it.
Oh, and in podcasting, we call it evergreen content, stuff that when you go back you can go back and listen to it anytime. It's not necessarily timely. How much of Cam's story is going to be evergreen 10, 15, 20 years from now?
Well, I'll say my favorite movie of all time is Rudy. I first watched that movie in the early 90s, and it's still my favorite movie, because it's an inspirational story that's based on a true story. And I think Cam's story is just like that. And I tend to purposely tell it in that aspect, to where it's something, because it has timeless qualities. Even though it's happened in a time frame, it definitely has timeless qualities of second chances and redemption. And it's just a really good story, and I think it will definitely be evergreen because it's such a good story.
Interesting note, Rudy Rudiger was a wrestler and a wrestling coach. So although all the Rudigers were in that area, so there's a little wrestling tie-in to your Rudy fandom there. But in the time we got left here on this episode of Short Time, Cam, there's a lot that's going to be put out here that, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know, and then there's going to be stuff that's put out that, again, based around what happened. Are you still going to be comfortable with that? It's one of those things, I guess I got to come back to the initial question again. How much of your story are you comfortable letting be out there? You're talking to a guy for a couple of years about it, but is it a little different when the whole world could potentially, look at how I was a screw up when I was a kid?
No, I'm not a very shy person, so I don't think anything's going to really get under my skin, just having my story out there. And, I've been very open with Drew so that he could put together an authentic story. And I think reading the screenplay, it is very tasteful, so I won't be painted in a bad light, but no, I'm not uncomfortable with my story being out there.
Well, the bad light's not necessarily one the part. It's also the good light and the bad light. Well, facts are facts, right? You can't really sugarcoat that, really.
Right.
If they want to contribute, they want to help, if they want to be part of this process, if you're looking for extras, that kind of thing, I mean, that's the cart before the horse in terms of we start shooting, but how can they go about reaching out to you and finding out how people can be involved in this type of thing, this project?
Yeah, sure. Well, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Cam Tessari Movie on all three of those social media outlets. Website is camtessarimovie.com. If you email, if you want to email, same thing, camtessarimovie@gmail.com. So it's pretty easy to find us. Matter of fact, if you want to stay up to date on everything, you can follow us on social media, whichever you prefer, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Because there's definitely going to be more and more news coming out in the coming months, and really want to get the ball rolling next year. So anybody that wants to, touch base, feel free through social media, and that's probably the best way. Or again, camtessarimovie@gmail.com is the email. So
Cam, what's next for you?
Well, I just bought a house in West Milton, Ohio, coaching for the Troy Christian Eagles. My actual rivals when I was back in high school. We split state titles with them, and working construction right now. So,
all right, because I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't know your better half but I'm going through and I see the name and I'm like, Sergeant, there's a relation there with Ben, correct?
Yes,
because that kid was a monster coming out of high school. So I'm sitting there going, man, wrestling people, man, that's what they do. they gravitate to other wrestling people. So you've definitely got somebody that knows the sport on your side there.
Yep.
Drew, last words, your way.
Definitely just hoping that people in the wrestling community, whether the wrestlers, the coaches, the parents, just the wrestling community, that's what this movie is, being made for. It's going to be an authentic wrestling movie, and wanting to keep it authentic. And again, with Cam's great story, with the authentic wrestling, I'm hoping that the wrestling community will be proud of it, and they'll come and check it out.
Cam, final thoughts.
Just thanks for having us on. Thanks for just having us on. Thanks for letting us get the word out, and go check us out on social media.